You've probably read the title, you've probably thought, here we go again. But when I say that this build is broken, I mean that this build is broken. When I say that this build has infinite DPS, I mean it has infinite DPS. I could stand here AFK for the next 20 hours and none of this would ever end. Hello, my fellow sorcerers, and welcome to the endless, self-perpetuating damage machine, where you can use a specific, very interesting, and probably a little bit unintended synergy to quite literally generate an endless feedback loop that permanently stuns every enemy affected, propagates onto every enemy near them, and so on and so forth, and in the meanwhile applies to them the constant, melting, unstoppable force of pure ball lightning stacked many times over, while charged bolts swarm not just from the enemies, but from you, the sorcerer, too, wherever you walk or happen to be stood. Huh. That's a bit of alright, isn't it? Okay, look, let's get out to brass tacks here. This obviously looks fantastic on training dummies that have endless health, and you can just go crazy on them. But the principle remains the same when we take it into actual content, especially in Abattoir of Zir, where the enemies have so much health that they do actually have a training dummy-like quality where they can sit there being perpetually stunned and perpetually spawning this endless swarm of lightning that then perpetually stuns them, and so on and so forth until everything is dead. I know you're thinking, yes, eventually enemies do become unstoppable, but hey, that's not a bad thing either, because once they've been made unstoppable, they're probably already dead or very close to it, and now that they're unstoppable, we can employ some very potent damaging effects against them. More than anything, though, this is just hilarious, right? Like, this is such a fun thing to be able to pull off, to be able to see. It's a really cool little experiment that I'm glad paid off, and a huge shout out to Jairu13 for asking me to investigate how a Havarion build with charged bolts enchantment and the stun synergy there would actually pan out, and doing a little bit of testing himself. This doesn't need the Uber Unique, of course. We have plenty of ways of stunning things as a sorcerer. The Convulsions passive in our skill tree, Raiment of the Infinite with Teleport, a Havarion if you do have it, Lightning Spear with its stun upgrade in Invoked, and there's even some Vampiric power action we can weave in too. The general idea is we layer over so many different sources of stun, coupled with the Charged Bolts enchantment, and we get some ridiculous results. And given that Charged Bolts might actually be my favourite build I've done all season, it's nice to revisit it in this way. It's a shame to not be able to go full Charged Bolts, as in casting it and using the unique staff to do with it, but bottom line, if you're going to push Abattoir, which is kind of the only thing you need a really cutting edge build to do, you have to use what's best, and that's the core of ball lightning. But this is spun in an entirely different direction that feels like a real eureka breakthrough moment that I had to share with you guys. So what exactly kind of goes on before we get into the nitty gritty here? Well, when we stun an enemy with the Charged Bolts enchantment, they release 3 Charged Bolts, right? So we will stun them until that happens using the staff proc, and there you go, they spark out, and that's all good. So the thing is, if you've got lots of enemies and then those charged bolts spark out and hit the other enemies. If those charged bolts have a chance to stun the enemies, which they do, lots of them, then they do, and those enemies release more charged bolts, which then spiral out and stun more enemies, and you see how it can just keep going and going and going until there isn't an enemy left that is stunnable or alive. We add to that the Ball Lightning enchantment if we really want to go all in, because then the charged bolts that get summoned will hit another enemy, stun them, release more charged bolts, spawn a Ball Lightning on them, which will then stun them more, releasing more charged bolts, and it's just this infinite feedback loop between these two enchantments. And it creates some really, really fun moments where you can just kind of go crazy, and once you reach a certain critical mass, the sheer level and swarm of charged bolts that you have going on is beautiful. Now, all of this said, the combination of charged bolts and Ball Lightning enchantment works great in low-level abattoirs, where things will just be dead by the time you get to them. It works in tier 100s or below, open world content, etc, etc. Basically everything that isn't pushing tier 9+ abattoirs. But if you are doing that, you will need to swap to a different setup just to reach the kind of pure damage numbers you need to reach. So that's what I will be presenting, but know that you can do this hilarity by the Charged Bolts and Ball Lightning synergy, but that doesn't technically make the best version of this build-wise that I'm going to share with you. Because what we can do is use the amount of charged bolts we're actually releasing to really amp up a certain unique like we have never seen before, which we will explain. Now, of course, this isn't going to top literally just pure min-max Ball Lightning that I debuted a sort of 4 or 5 days ago now. That is just kind of the definitive way to push and play, but this is by far and away comfier because everything's stunned, easier, and you can clear abattoirs while AFK if they're low enough tier, and you can't tell me that that is not just a beautiful thing to see. And in terms of pure spectacle, creativity, and enjoyment, this is peak Sorcerer. Let's get into this. Behold then thy skill tree of power. I'm sorry, I just want to make the start of the skill tree interesting each time. I say as I start with 2 bolts in Firebolt to unlock the core skills and give us our first enchantment slot. Also, I've said this so many times, I said 2 bolts instead of 2 points. Anyway, yes, this is what I'm saying. While the Charged Bolts Ball Lightning combo creates that chaos, we need Burning Synergy, both for the extra damage it provides and the damage reduction it gives us access to, and because the Burning Board is the best place for the Blood Glyph, yeah, it can't really be ignored, so here we are. And you can guess what the other enchantment slot has to be to do this, but we will get to why this still makes something absolutely absurd. In any case, for now, move on to your core skills, where we are literally just getting charged bolts. I've gone up to 4 points into it because that's the most I can do. Technically, if you prefer, you can do this, which feels a little bit anticlimactic, but I like to get the extra damage on the charged bolts since we are creating so many of them. Take it down to enhanced for that little extra explosion, which does even more for us, and then destructive to give us this constant, especially here, 25% damage reduction. Over to your defensives, where we get Flame Shield, a beautiful ability, and Shimmering for the nice heal as we spam it. Teleport, of course, it does a lot for us, keeps us moving, keeps us safe, Raiment Stun if you're using it, and the damage reduction is key, and then lastly just a point in elemental attunement so it can happen. Then we go down here to get yourself Align the Elements, and the double defensive of Mana Shield for 21% DR and Protection, so all of our abilities give us that sweet barrier, both for not dying and for doing more goodness. Also, if you really don't think the 3 points here are worth the extra damage, or I guess I should say 2, you can technically do this and get a little bit extra across these 2 if you're pushing higher abattoirs with this to keep yourself alive a little bit, but I like to have the extra damage because really I'm using this to speed farm abattoirs to farm the glyph, because this is so much faster than the peak ball lightning, which yes is great for pushing, but in terms of just clearing the dungeon ASAP, because this whole setup spreads out and sort of automatically kills every enemy as you go forward, it really cannot be matched for pure pace. We get 3 out of 3 Conjuration Mastery, we have enough Lightning Spears and Ice Blades up all the time to get a good amount out of this. We want as much Lucky Hit as possible to power the stun engines, so get Precision, and then get your Lightning Spear actually able to stun. Over to your Mastery, where we get our Devouring Blaze to work with the Burning Synergy, and fill out your Ball Lightning, and then finally down to Wizards to have the Sea of Crackling Energy, which provides us with our infinite mana, because we're fighting so much for so long, especially in Abattoir, that you will never want for more. Over to the ultimates, where we get Unstable Currents, which will have 100% uptime here, as we will be Flicker Stepping, and that gives us Prime and Supreme, as we will be snapshotting to both have Via's Mastery and Overflowing Energy active at once. If you don't like doing it or can't be bothered, then take this point out and put it somewhere else. But for now, leave it on Via's Mastery. Then 1 point in Coursing Currents, just to get our extra 15% damage reduction, and this time Convulsions, so we have an extra source of constant stun from all of our damage. And then we want to slot in our nice second enchantment slot, which is, of course, Charged Bolts. And here we are, looking good. So before we truly get into the gear side of things, I want to really highlight what we're doing by using the Charged Bolts and Firebolt synergy over the Ball Lightning. So essentially, it's X-Files. So X-Files, as we know, explodes for massive damage, and every separate dot on the target has a separate chance to explode, based on the lucky hit calculation. With the Firebolt enchantment, every single instance of damage you do to an enemy applies an extra stack of firebolts. So we're hitting them loads with Ball Lightning, and we're also hitting them loads with Charged Bolts, because 3 come out of every stunned enemy, and we're stunning every enemy constantly. Also, we're doing Nova Explosions from Charged Bolts because of the 3 that get hit and then explode, applying another stack of burning. So if we have a quick just Lightning Spear, you see the burning damage is quite low, and then it starts ramping up a lot higher, already to the 600s with just the 1 Charged Bolt that we actually had there. But if I actually attack for a little bit and see this happen, trying to be careful not to accidentally trigger the endless loop here, well, then you can see the burning damage is now up to 35k, 15k, 20k. That is a lot of stacks of it, which means a lot of chances for X-Files to explode. And it can get even more ridiculous. You can end up in a situation where I've seen over 100k's worth of firebolts, and you can see in the madness of this visual effect, all of the little explosions of fire going on. There is so many procs of it so often. We're up to like 78k, 90k, 50k. You really see it start to ramp, and that's so cool. So that said then, let's actually talk the gear. Of course, a Havarion as the lucky hit chance to stun. I know it's a Uber Unique, so if you don't have it, well, then you simply want to use Dagger and Focus. A Dagger with more damage to vulnerable enemies. Make sure it is a Dagger for the close enemy damage, and then a Focus with Conceited, more damage with a barrier, and that's all good. Then we want ourselves on your necklace, Gravitational, because it kind of has to go here, and it's not bad. It's a big increase to your Ball Lightning. Over on your gloves then, which we need to be normal gloves for normal aspect, we need piercing, so Charged Bolts pierce. So they pass through all the enemies, apply all the firebolts, do the stunning, make more Charged Bolts, and it's how you get that swarm. I really do wish we could get the last longer and homing from the staff, but alas, we want the extra stun. Though that said, you could totally play this with Lam Eason, and you would have a great time too. too. Then defensively on our chest, which I've got as a normal chest, but if you're doing tier, I'd say 8, 9 or under Abattoir and any other content in the game, then you want to use Raiment instead for the extra stun and the damage, but I've got this on for pushing tier 11 plus Abattoir, and you want Disobedience. If you are using Raiment, then you want Disobedience on your helmet. But for me, you have Mage Lords to get the extra 27% DR from Via's Mastery. And it's at this point that you need to do the snapshotting or decide if you want to. Basically, go into the dungeon, into Abattoir, with this aspect equipped, with this key passive on, and then simply swap to Overflowing Energy for the reduced cooldown on teleport, and you will have both active at the same time, which is a nice little trick that I'm sure won't be around in Season 3. Then, unique-wise, we have Tibalt's Will to give us loads of mana whenever we teleport or flame shield, and the damage is lovely. Flicker Step for that constant ultimate uptime, which means more lightning spears, which means more stuns, and a lot more damage and survivability. Then the X-Fouls for the explosion spam, Tal Rashas for the stacking multiplicative that every good sorcerer build should have. That extra non-physical damage is so nice. When it comes to your affixes, well, there's very few items with affixes here. Offensively, you just want attack speed, crit chance, lucky hit chance, and primary resource restore. I cannot exaggerate how many primary resource restores go off when this is happening. Like, look at me, I'm stood nowhere near the enemies, just spamming ball lightning at the hyper attack speed that I have, and I'm not really running out of mana because primary resource restore is happening so often. Is that not absolutely brilliant? Then you want your necklace with ideally ranks of Devouring Blaze, ranks of Mastery Skills, Total Armor, Mana Cost Reduction, and then movement speed. That does well for you. Defensively, damage reduction from close, from distant, from burning, percent Total Armor on both helmet and chest if you are not using Raiment, and then Intelligence is fine too, as is cooldown reduction and maximum life. Gem-wise, crit damage to vulnerable, armor in your jewelry, and then life in your armor. When talking vampiric powers here, well, domination is a no-brainer, because everything is constantly stunned, and this is a big increase. Infection for the extra 4th stack of Tal Rashas, the usual duo of Accursed Touch and Prey on the Weak for constant vulnerable everywhere, and then Ravenous for the silly attack speed it provides, which is good in all of the ways. So, how do we actually go about operating this? Well, firstly, I want to give you the swap you should make if you are going to use this with the ball lightning in place of the firebolt, if you're doing easier content and don't need the extra firebolt damage and just want to create that endless loop as easily and as quickly as possible. Well, of course, use both enchantments. Now we don't need X-Fouls, which means we can instead use a ring that has the ball lightning orbits on it, which is really good, which means we no longer need it on the necklace. This then means that we can have a different aspect on our necklace, and the aspect that you want is the Exploiter's aspect for more multiplicative damage to unstoppable enemies. Because we're stunning everybody so much, they will get unstoppable fairly quickly, and then you'll do massive multiplicative more damage to them, and it's a nice way to make up for not having Firebolt if you are going to try and push Zir with this variation anyway. It's not necessary in lesser content, but it is a nice call. So how to play it is very kind of simple. It's how to play every ball lightning. We just get in, use all your stuff essentially on cooldown, use your defensives when it's necessary and whenever you need mana, and you'll start to see the swarms of charged bolts adding all of the stacks as we power down, having endless mana and generally just ruin everything, constantly jump through them with Flicker Step to get your ultimate off and cooldown as much as you can, and wait for the infinity loop to actually come about. It really kind of plays itself. Just spam all of the things and don't stand in the no-no explosions. Paragon board then is going to be something I plan on blasting through because it is identical to the Paragon board of the current best ball lightning, which is one of the nice things about this. It still gets to be powered by the best Paragon board you can have. So I won't go super in-depth as we go through it. It will be copyable at the build link down below, and indeed on the previous build guide. So, the first board, as you see it like this, the glyph being Elementalist, get it activated exactly, and then move on to the core of Sorcerer, which is your Enchantment Master, and the trifecta of Balance, Elementalist, and Ruinous. Organize it like this, activate the glyph Reinforced here for the damage reduction with a barrier, and we are good to move on in this manner over to the right for our Burning Instinct board. This is where your blood glyph goes, so get every single node in range of it, and the 2 rare nodes too, and then we can move on and up right through Kindling for the little boost, branch off to the right in order to get Keeper of Flames to keep yourself alive, then go straight up, branch off for Safeguard and the extra damage reduction from Elites, heading straight up then into the next board up north is going to be your Static Surge, arranged like this, so the paralyzing is at the bottom right. We want to head through that paralyzing exactly like this to get as much value while spending the minimal amount of points, going up, and then we grab this extra dex in order to activate Destruction. This is one upgrade I have made over the previous board because we no longer need to grab Electro, so it saved a couple of points, and this gives us our nice crit damage increase as we go through Incapacitate to get the final bit of Dexterity. Then we can head south into the Frigid Fate Vulnerable board, immediately go down and right to grab the Oppressive node that you want arranged in the top right, and then we get down to this Dexterity node where we initially go left to the Glyph Adept for bigger ball lightnings, activate it by grabbing Chilling, the Intelligence along the way, this one extra one here, and then the extra Intelligence from Weakness, through Weakness to our extra Vulnerable Multiplicative over at the Legendary node, and then we can head right into our final little board here, which is the Ceaseless Conduit board, in order to just get a little bit of a bump in damage from Galvanic, but mainly it's to activate our final glyph, which is Territorial, for an extra 15% damage reduction. So that works out very nicely and more than gets the job done. Now, if you are not interested in pushing Abattoir of Zir and you just want to use this build, then you can do a little bit of a shift, which is get rid of this little extra arm here and get rid of this little extra arm here. Then come down to Frigid Fate and rearrange slightly so you go through these 3 intelligences here. Then we can get rid of these, which leaves the glyph activated, and now we have exactly 14 points to go from this here, and using it, we want to grab ourselves Enchantment Master, so your charged bolts are more likely to summon actual charged bolts when you stun, and if you're using the Ball Lightning version, you're more likely to summon Ball Lightnings, so that is an option for you. So there we have it, everybody, a nice little fun way to mess with Sorcerer that results in something kind of ridiculous, especially against the old training dummies, but certainly against anything else you care to use it against too. Everything will spend its entire life stunned and then dead, and if it somehow has enough health to not be that, well then if you're running the exploiters, it's going to be dead very soon after reaching that point. It's just really great watching this swarm of lightning propagate forward through the dungeon, through everywhere you're going, stunning and swarming, stunning and swarming. It's amazing, and I cannot overstate how fun it feels to play. And if you are using the X-Files versions, the constant pops of explosions, yeah, it really gets everything going. For now then, let me know what else you'd like to see. Like if you enjoyed this, subscribe and hit the bell for more. Consider supporting the future of the channel on Patreon down below. And until we meet again, a goodbye.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.